Have you ever wondered why some TV shows were off-limits when you were a kid? Maybe your parents said it was because of swearing or some inappropriate jokes, or even hints of sexual content. That's partly true. But in my case, there was something deeper, something that would stay with me for years. Started when I was about 6 years old. At that age, I had this rebellious streak where the very moment someone told me not to do something, I wanted to do it even more. If you told me not to touch the cake saved for a family gathering, I would sneak into the kitchen and eat half of it. So, of course, when my mom told me never to watch the late-night lineup on Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, I made it my personal mission to watch it every single night. For about a week, I got away with it. I'd sneak out of bed, tiptoe down the hall with my stuffed animals, and sit cross-legged on the floor right in front of the glowing TV screen. The remote was clutched tight in my little hands, and I'd giggle to myself, amazed at how clever I was. Mom will never know, I thought, but moms always know. She began noticing the little clues. The stuffed animals left abandoned in the living room, the circles under my eyes, the way I dragged my feet during the day. Then, one night, she finally caught me red-handed. I can't remember what was playing at that exact moment, but I do remember one disturbing detail. The word penis being repeated over and over in some ridiculous chant. Honestly, that could have been any Adult Swim cartoon. Looking back now, it might have been a random sketch from Aqua Teen Hunger Force or Mission Hill. It doesn't matter. What mattered was that my mom had caught me staring at the forbidden channel. Like any guilty 6-year-old, I broke down and cried. Loud, ugly sobs that shook my chest until my throat burned. I begged her to forgive me, promised I'd never do it again, swore that I was sorry. She didn't budge. She gave me a spanking, marched me straight upstairs, and tucked me back into bed. I thought she was cruel at the time, but honestly, I kind of appreciate it now. That was her way of protecting me, even if it felt harsh. After that night, I vowed to never sneak Adult Swim again. Of course, kids make promises all the time, like swearing off chocolate after eating too much. Those vows don't usually last. Because even though I was forbidden, those shows haunted my imagination. They were edgy, they were strange, and above all, they were different from the safe, cheerful cartoons my mom wanted me to watch. And that difference was intoxicating. I craved it even at 6 years old. All my friends at school whispered about shows they weren't supposed to see, bragging like they were veterans of some secret society. I hated feeling left out. About a week after I got caught, my dad came to visit. My parents had split up before I could even remember them being together, so his visits were rare. Maybe once a year, if that. He traveled constantly for work, chasing storms across the Midwest. I never really understood why anyone would want to follow tornadoes for a living, but to me, he was larger than life, a kind of storm chaser superhero. When he showed up, I was thrilled. I couldn't wait to hear his stories about lightning splitting the sky in two, or tornado funnels twisting like monsters across the plains. He told them with so much detail that my 6-year-old brain soaked it up like bedtime fairy tales. And because it was a special occasion, my mom gave me a break from my usual bedtime. No 8:30 curfew. I could stay up as late as I wanted with Dad. That's when I hatched my plan. My dad was a pushover, especially when it came to me. I think he carried a lot of guilt for never being around, so he gave me pretty much whatever I wanted when he was there. And I knew exactly how to use that. As the clock crept toward midnight, I put on my sweetest face and asked him if we could watch this new channel I had discovered. He didn't hesitate. He didn't scold me, didn't even ask questions. He just grabbed the remote and flipped the TV over to Adult Swim. And just like that, the forbidden thrill came rushing back. The mischief, the adrenaline, and that quiet undertone of fear. Because let's be honest, Adult Swim cartoons, especially for a little kid, could be terrifying. The crude humor, the bizarre animation, the strange music, it all felt like a nightmare barely disguised as comedy. I sat closer and closer to the screen, soaking it in, while my dad slowly drifted off beside me on the couch. His snoring soon filled the room, that deep foghorn rumble I always teased him about. It irritated me, so I slid off the couch and onto the floor, my face just a few feet from the screen, the flickering glow making the shadows on the walls seem alive. That's when things started to change. At first, it was normal, commercial breaks punctuated by black screens, the Adult Swim logo floating in white letters. That silence always scared me more than the shows themselves. The TV would go dark. The house would fall silent except for my dad's snores. And for a few seconds, I'd swear something was watching me from the shadows. But this time, the silence stretched too long. No logo, no commercial, just darkness. Then, without warning, the screen jolted. A logo did appear, but it wasn't the Adult Swim bumper I recognized. Instead, it was a strange grid of white lines inside a black box, sharp and sterile, like the National Geographic logo drained of all color. And then came the sound. That deep, booming THX movie theater sound effect shook the speakers. It was so loud, I half expected my dad to wake up. He didn't. He just snored on. Then a man's voice, deep and theatrical, cut through the static silence. We now present our feature presentation. For a second, relief washed over me. Maybe this was just how Adult Swim introduced a late-night movie. Maybe this was fine. I wasn't about to get spanked again. Couldn't have been more wrong. The movie began with a sky dripping in rain. But it wasn't just rain. Among the clear droplets were streaks of scarlet, thick and heavy like blood. Only it didn't quite look real. It reminded me of those cheap paint-by-number kits, the red dripping across the dark sky like sloppy watercolor. Then came the first shot, a bird's-eye view of a young woman. Her hair was a striking violet, shining unnaturally against the gloom. But as the rain poured, her hair color washed away, leaving purple streaks sliding down her skin like dye running from wet clothes. The scene cut closer, zooming into her face. That's when I froze. Her eyes weren't eyes at all. They were black slits, narrow and empty, shaped exactly like the holes of an electrical outlet. And the longer I looked, the more her entire body resembled a human-shaped outlet. Thin stick-like arms and legs jutted awkwardly from her frame, cartoonish and unsettling, like something doodled in a notebook but given life. It was so crude, so wrong, and yet deliberate. The outlet woman lifted one of her fragile stick arms upward, and the camera panned with it, rising higher and higher until it landed on a window pane above her. The glass reflected nothing. No face, no hair, no body, just emptiness. At 6 years old, I didn't think much of it. But looking back, that detail chills me. A figure without reflection. A body without presence. The piano began then. It wasn't cheerful, playful music. It was slow, haunting, and distorted, like it was being played on an ancient, cracked record player. The kind of song that belonged at funerals, not in a cartoon. The melody dragged, notes bending and scraping as if the piano itself were in pain. The camera shifted again, through the glass this time. Inside, an old man stood beside a table. He looked nothing like the outlet woman. He looked hyper-detailed, almost realistic compared to her simple design. His cheeks were swollen red, his mustache long and curling like some twisted Santa Claus. His blue eyes shimmered unnaturally, glassy like marbles, too bright to be human. On the table sat the source of the piano music, a beautifully ornate record player. Its base was carved from dark wood, decorated with gold filigree, and from its side jutted a crank handle. The man turned the crank slowly. Each twist made the record spin, and the warped piano continued its dreadful song. Then, with a sudden sputter, he began to chant in a sing-song voice. "Turn the crank! Turn the crank!" His voice was jolly, almost gleeful, but it dripped with menace. The camera zoomed in unervingly close to his hand winding the crank. The wooden base began to crack. Splinters spread across the grain, creaking and groaning as though the pressure inside would burst the entire machine apart. "Turn the crank! Turn the crank!" he shouted now, his voice booming over the piano. I remember tears stinging my eyes. I hated loud noises as a child, and this scene was all noise and chaos. The creaking wood, the pounding piano, the man's manic voice. It was overstimulation designed to terrify. Then the inevitable happened. The crank snapped. The record player collapsed in on itself, fragments of wood splintering outward, smoke pouring from the wreckage. The smoke, strangely enough, didn't spread. It stayed clustered tightly around the machine, as if it was alive, refusing to touch the rest of the room. The man stopped smiling. His cherry-red cheeks turned pale. The light in his eyes dulled until it vanished completely. And then his glassy blue eyes shattered. Not like tears, not like normal glass. They literally exploded into shards, tumbling down his face and clinking against the floor. The camera didn't cut away. It stayed locked on his empty sockets, black voids leaking thin trails of smoke. A whisper followed, so soft I almost thought it came from behind me instead of the TV. No more must I turn the crank. My chest tightened. I didn't want to look at the screen anymore, but I couldn't look away. The picture cut abruptly to black. Then came a new scene, a wide shot of a city street. The entire ground was covered in glittering glass shards, sparkling like frost under a blood-red sky. In the middle of it all lay the outlet woman, motionless. Her purple hair had completely drained away, leaving her surrounded by pale lavender shards, like her essence had bled into the broken glass itself. At that moment, I broke. I sobbed uncontrollably, louder than I had ever cried before. Even as a child, I knew what death looked like, and that cartoon character was dead. I glanced back at my dad, desperate for comfort, but he was still asleep, snoring, completely oblivious to the nightmare unraveling on screen. And then the next scene began, dragging me deeper. The screen showed an hourglass, sand slipping endlessly from top to bottom. The camera pulled back slowly, revealing more of the empty, colorless background. Then a voice, cheerful, yet sinister, cut through the silence. "She's perfectly fine. Now don't you fret. Thanks for watching my show, kids. But you're not out of hell yet." That's when I screamed so loud it finally woke my dad. When I spun the dial back to Cartoon Network, I expected the creepy channel to still be there. Maybe that strange static logo flickering in the dark. But instead, the regular Adult Swim bumper appeared, the one I had seen a few nights before when I first started sneaking downstairs. It was so normal, like nothing had ever happened. The announcer's voice rolled out with its usual weird humor, telling viewers to grab snacks and stay up late. I remember sitting there, shaking, unable to process it. I wanted to scream at my dad to look, to tell him about the outlet-faced girl, the man with the glass eyes, and the sound of that crank. But when he stirred awake after my shriek, he just laughed, apologized for dozing off, and picked up the remote. "Did I miss something, Pear?" he said, rubbing his eyes. He thought I was just scared of some cartoon. When he hit the recall button, the TV jumped back to the channel I had been watching before I turned it to Adult Swim. Only this time, it didn't show the black and white grid logo. It didn't show the outlet creature or the glass-eyed man. Instead, a plain blue message filled the screen. "Signal not authorized. Please contact your cable provider." My dad chuckled. "Guess we don't have the subscription after all." He ruffled my hair, told me to get some sleep, and went upstairs. I just sat there, staring at the dead channel, heart hammering in my chest. The next morning, I heard my parents fighting in the kitchen. My mom's voice was sharp. She was scolding my dad for letting me stay up late, for letting me watch shows I wasn't supposed to. My dad kept apologizing, saying it was just cartoons, no big deal. I wanted to run downstairs and tell her everything I'd seen. I wanted to explain it wasn't just cartoons. But the words wouldn't come. Because how could I explain it? How could I say that a TV station that wasn't even on our cable plan somehow broadcast a movie about an electrical demon throwing towers and bleeding through glass? Even at 6 years old, I knew no one would believe me. So I stayed quiet. But the images stayed. At school, when my friends bragged about watching late-night shows, I didn't even want to join in. Not after what I saw. They talked about episodes of Aqua Teen Hunger Force or Robot Chicken, laughing about the weird jokes I barely understood. I just sat there, silent, replaying the image of that purple-haired outlet girl lying in a sea of glass, her sockets empty, her face pale and lifeless. I started to dread nighttime. Every time I passed by the living room, I expected the TV to turn itself on, the grid logo to appear, the crank to start twisting. Even years later, the memory never really left. It wasn't until much later, after I had quit my job as a power line inspector, that I pieced things together. Remember the green ash tree lodged in the tower, roots and all? The grooves in the steel that looked like teeth marks? I went back to those old photos one day, long after I had left Dickinson. I zoomed in on the metal where it had been torn apart. The grooves lined up perfectly with the marks on the tree I had seen in the clearing. Teeth marks. Not storm damage. Not vandals. Something big. Something with a mouth. And that's when it hit me. Maybe what I saw on that strange broadcast wasn't a cartoon at all. Maybe it was some kind of recording, a warning, or even a ritual. Maybe the outlet-faced girl and the glass-eyed man weren't just drawings but something else. Something that didn't belong on TV or in our world. And if that's true, then maybe my mom wasn't just protecting me from bad words or weird adult humor. Maybe she knew something. Maybe she had seen something once, and she knew what was lurking out there in the dark. To this day, I can't drive past a power tower at night without feeling my stomach twist. Every time I hear the low groan of metal, I freeze. And every time I catch the faint static of a channel between stations, my heart stops, waiting for that white-lined logo to appear again. I never did see that channel after that night. I tried, God, I tried. Staying up until dawn, flipping between stations, hoping and dreading to find it. But all I ever found was the same old cartoons, the same bumpers, the same late-night talk shows. But sometimes, when the house is quiet and the lights are off, I swear I can still hear it. That voice, that cheerful, booming voice that doesn't belong to any actor I've ever heard. Turn the crank. Turn the crank. She's fine, don't you fret. But you're not out of hell yet.